Well, good afternoon and welcome to Round the Table, live with Christian Concern. It's great to have you with us. If you're following us on Facebook or on YouTube, do say hi, do chat and ask questions and comments, and we will try to interact with as many as we can. Today, I'm joined by Andrea Williams, the founder and chief executive of Christian Concern, and by Michael Phillips as well, one of the top lawyers on the Christian Legal Centre. Afternoon, folks. Nice to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
And we were going to start by talking about a very big case that we had in court this last week, finished I think on Monday this week, the case of Shay Amuba, an actress. Michael, do you want to remind us what that case was about and what happened with her? Or maybe Andrea would like to do that with Michael's.
I can't really hear at the moment. I'm sorry.
Okay. Andrea, do you want to remind us what it's about?
Yes, well, you will all, I hope, remember the story of the beautiful young actress Shay Amuba. Now, she happens to be Andrea Amuba, who is the co-founder of Christian Concern. She happens to be his daughter, and so I've known her since she was a little girl, around 6 or 7, and she was certainly singing and dancing way back then. And I remember when her mum said to me, when she was in her early teens, all that Shay wants to do is to be an actress, and she wants to sing and dance on Broadway. And of course, as mums, you know, we all know that children aspire to such things. But Tolu, her mum, looked right at me like Shay really meant it. And of course, Shay really did mean it. And the story of Shay is that she went on to study performing arts. She went to Mount View Drama School, and there she graduated. And after her showcase, where the agents all come, 19 agencies offered her a position to come and join them.
Wow!
And Shay, as a young actress, was in the very unusual position of essentially working from the moment that she graduated. There wasn't downtime.
Amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it was actually amazing. But the case in the last couple of weeks has been this, that she, due to an historic Facebook post that Shay had written in 2014, that was unearthed after she was given the lead role in a production of a musical called The Colour Purple, based on that same novel by Alice Walker. Now, the lead character, Celie, in The Colour Purple is one that's been much discussed in literature over the years, is studied at GCSE and even at A-level. And it's the story of a Black African woman in 1930s America, who is beaten and subjugated by her father, who impregnates her, makes her pregnant twice. The children are removed. She then goes into a violent marriage. She has a little sister. She sees that her sister's going to get abused. She's about protecting her sister. And then, yes, it's a harrowing story. But in the midst of all of this, Celie writes to God. She also, so the whole work is around her letters to God. Right. And in the midst of all of this as well, Celie breaks free from the subjugation and the horror. And in this period, she also forms a very close relationship with a woman called Shug. And that particular relationship, which is fair to say is sexualized a bit in the novel, but it is fair to say that has become, as time has gone on, something onto which the LGBT lobby has latched, in a sense. They're making and has been making, or they say they have been making, Celie a gay iconic character. Now, I just want to say here that the reality about all of this is that when Whoopi Goldberg played Celie in the film version of The Colour Purple that was directed by Steven Spielberg, the tonality of the whole movie was not around that, was not around some idea of sexuality.
Yeah.
It was around all these other.
She ends up getting heterosexually married at the end of the novel as well. That's true, is it?
Well, she is married. She's married in an abusive relationship, but it ends up that that essentially that life is fairly settled for her at the very end of the novel, despite all this trauma. So it's the working through of all of these themes,
right?
That's there in the novel, these complicated themes, these complex themes. That's kind of novels. That's art. That's the way.
Shay has acted in this in productions of Colour Purple before. She's very familiar with the story. She
was very familiar with the story in her, as she called it, in her remembrance from growing up with it, having studied at school. Also, she had played Nettie, who was the sister in a concert version of the Colour Purple. And as well as this, when she went to audition in this particular situation that I'm coming to talk about now, she had auditioned for the role of Nettie, but was offered the lead role of Sally.
Right.
When she was offered that role, an actor in the West End who plays in Hamilton called Aaron Lee Lambert, who is very much a hard political activist, if you follow his Twitter, and also an LGBT activist.
Yeah.
He must have trawled through her social media account and unearthed the post dating back to 2014, where she essentially, in the wake of the first same-sex marriages in the UK, was saying, Christians, it's not a time for lukewarm Christianity. I'm sure we can put the full post up here. It's a time to get behind the word of God. Marriage is between a man and a woman, and homosexuality is wrong. Yeah. And Aaron Lee Lambert challenged her to apologize and retract that post. Yeah. And she said that she would not. Yeah. And then what then ensued, this was immediately the day after she had been appointed into the role, what then ensued was an absolute social media storm, a social media backlash. She was racially taunted. She was called the N-word. The C word was used on her. There were death threats on her. She was basically told to retract what she had said in that post, and it would be great if the post could be put up.
Well, I see that they've put up a link to the about it, and I wondered if we should just play a video that we've got of her as well, so you can just see who she is and what she says about it. So can we play that now?
The Facebook post was made in 2014. Was that 4 years ago? On all my social medias, I always post stuff about God or the Bible or scriptures. They knew that I was Christian, and they knew my stance on marriage, they knew my stance on my faith, they knew my stance on God, on many different things that are in the Bible. I still can't believe it today. There was this massive opportunity, something that I never thought I would ever even achieve. And then I remember the casting director telling me, Shay, be very careful about where you go next, where you train next, because you have a very raw talent. The post that I wrote 4 years ago, I don't know how it came out. I don't even know who found it. I don't know who the person is that posted it either. I was quite taken back, and I was like, wow, really? People really think I hate them? People were calling me homophobic, and then I started getting calls from the producers saying something like I should retract the statement or what I posted, or say sorry for what I posted. I didn't think it would get this far. In terms of termination, in terms of me losing an agent, I've been trying to email agents, trying to get work, and it's just no response. I didn't think it would escalate to this, but it has, so now I need to deal with it.
So there we go. That was really well explained there, I think, in that short video, and I think there's more you can watch on our website about it. But Michael, if I go to you, there's legal precedent here with Felix Ngole's case, is there not? So tell us about this and how this case works.
Yeah, I think that what happens in any particular case is that we try to rely on precedent, cases which have gone before, in order to show that what has happened in this particular case is similar to what has happened in another case. So with Felix's case, We have a social worker who spoke out on social media. He spoke out very strongly at the time of a marriage registrar who went to prison in America. And initially he lost his case in the High Court, but eventually went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal agreed that you can express your views on sexual morality, gender ideas, and homosexuality from a traditional point of view. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you are the kind of person who would engage in discrimination. And so obviously what happened with this particular case, with Shay's case, that we tried to use that precedent was put forward, but inevitably the other side said, well, look, it's completely different, it's not relevant here, and so on. And so that's quite a typical thing which happens in court cases. Even though precedent may well have been set before, the other side, because they want to win and they don't want to lose, and so therefore they will seek to try to distinguish the two cases, which is what happened.
And I think that what was shocking about the whole thing as well was that in many ways we spent 6 days in court, but the case is very simple. A Facebook post was unearthed. There was a media backlash. The theatre company and the agency said, unless you retract that post, unless you say sorry, unless you stop thinking that, then you cannot, you are terminated. It was a moment for them to hold their nerve, to let the social media storm pass by, and then to discuss with Shay the what next. But instead they demanded a full retraction, and nothing less than a full retraction would do. They then went on cleverly to really put Shay on trial. We brought them to court. Shay brought them to court for discrimination, for unfairly terminating the contracts. But in fact, it was as if she was on trial. Her very faith was on trial. The Bible was on trial. What marriage was, what the Bible says about marriage was on trial. It's all these sorts of things. That's what went on throughout the whole of these 6 days. At one point, one of the counsel, who was representing the agency, actually said, you were going to practice a kind of theatrical gay conversion therapy, weren't you? In terms of the role. I mean, how
do they get to that? And that's crazy.
I know, and things like
what does that even mean? I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Well, one of the deep ironies is that they said that the only way that Seeley could be interpreted, and was going to be interpreted in this production, which, by the way, came after all of these events, when they got the author and the author of the musical to basically say she is definitely lesbian. It's iconic. Bear in mind, we couldn't really find a production until this point where that was the centrality of the story.
Yeah.
But this now became almost an absolute characteristic of the part, as opposed to the high nuance which it has.
Yeah.
But that could be. There was no other interpretation, no other way of doing the color purple, no way of getting round playing the complexity of the character, but getting round anything sexually explicit, which was really Shay's parameter. She wouldn't act out anything sexually explicit on stage, heterosexual or homosexual. But the Bible was open to multiple interpretations, according to counsel, going after all the time. There are Christians that believe in.
So there's only one interpretation of the play.
Yeah.
But
multiple interpretations. Yeah.
But there's many interpretations of the Bible. That's the way. Even though they swear on the Bible at the beginning of their testimonies and things.
Well, I mean, that was that was an interesting state of play. Interestingly, Ade and Shay affirmed. The chief executive of the Leicester Curve swore on the Bible, and the agency.
And then they proceed to ridicule the Bible in their questioning of Shay and things. Yeah. So why do you think they're so aggressive against Shay and what she believes in this kind of way, the culture and the court as well?
Mike?
Yeah, I think that very often you find that you turn up to court, you represent somebody who's maybe accused of all manner of heinous crimes, murder, rape, paedophilia, and you're treated with the utmost respect by the judiciary and by prosecution counsel or whoever it is. And you turn up to court representing somebody who said that they don't want to work on Sunday or play a role like this, and very often the hostility you face is absolutely astronomical. And so you can look at it from a number of different points of view. I guess as a Christian, you would say that there is another battle which is at war. And so sometimes people, when they see Christians making a stand that they do, they just see red, and rationality, manners, and so on go out of the window. It's not always the case. Sometimes you have very pleasant tribunals and so on, but sometimes the hostility that you see is really something that you can only ever really know and feel if you're actually there in the courtroom.
Yes, I've been trying to write about it almost ever since, and it's very hard to actually create on a written page the mood of the room. But I think, Michael, it would be right to say that the mood of the room in many of the cases, the Christian Legal Centre cases, is until you actually are there and really living through it and see all the twists and turns, it is hard to communicate, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. And I think the thing is that very often what would otherwise, you take out the element of Christianity and you put another, what we call a protected characteristic, and then all of the hostility would go. And so sometimes it's just, unfortunately, to certain judges and to certain people involved in these kinds of cases, they're just not able to see past, at face value, the fact that Christians deserve protection by the law, even if they believe things which are unpalatable to the modern era. And so that is their right. You consider a situation whereby, if, for example, if I have a law firm and I employ mostly white people, and somebody turns up, I think that they're going to be a white person, and I turn them away because I say, look, my client base, I'm afraid to say, they wouldn't really tolerate somebody who's black. And there'd be no question about it. Be sued, struck off, and all the rest of it. But imagine if a Christian turned up and it was a pro-LGBT firm, and we said, look, I'm ever so sorry, but the client base wouldn't tolerate somebody of your views. Then in those circumstances, then it seems as though different criteria apply, even though you're just really, Martin Luther King said that we should be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. And he was quite right to say that. But the situation now is that we are being judged as Christians by not the color, not by the content of our character, but by the content of our beliefs. And that's the difficulty that Shay faced.
And I think the other thing with Shay is that she had successfully navigated until this point, very successfully navigated. Remember, just a young woman, 23, 24, 25, had navigated the theatre world. She'd worked in productions where she'd been asked to go and participate in videos for Pride, these sorts of things with her cast, had managed to just quietly remove herself from that. Everything was absolutely fine, had navigated difficult scripts, worked it out, because that's what you do in theatre. What happens is that you choose roles. It's not just about being offered roles, but if you don't want a role, you can also say no. If roles are beyond the kind of things that you want to do, that all works itself out. Or during a production, if there's something you don't want to do, let's say something sexually explicit, then that generally is worked around. What was not known and could not have been known when Shay was offered the part of Celie was that they were, well, in fact, it probably wasn't true. The story developed into this was going to be all about the lesbian relationship, when we know that the story is about so much more than than the one relationship between two women.
Yeah. So, and I think you said, Andrea, the level of
just on that as well, that the retraction wasn't enough. It had to be. Nothing was going to be enough.
Yes.
So no apology, no retraction. It had to be it was an apology that was so deep to then move to an approval.
That's what this whole movement demands, isn't it? Approval of morality. That's where you have to go. You can't just tolerate it. You have to approve it. And if you don't approve it, then then you're a pariah, and that you're classified as like being racist effectively and that kind of thing. Because even though of course Romans 1 says approval effectively is worse than practice itself, right? Not only do you practice these things, but also approve of them, and that's effectively implying that's worse than approval. But here we are, we're being told you must approve this stuff, not just tolerate it, approve it, and that's the real concern here, isn't it? So look, we're waiting for judgment on that, aren't we? It could come out maybe next week. We don't know when exactly, but do pray with us for that case. We'll see where it comes out next week, and we'll keep you in touch on it. But maybe moving on, Michael, just talk through your own experience. I know you're passionate about this, about the sexualization of our culture more generally, and the influence that has on our culture.
Yeah, so I did a talk probably about a year or so ago, really on the effects, the corrosive effects of really the increased sexualization of our culture. So a movement which started many years ago in the 1960s has reached a point now that, a lot of the cases which we're now seeing coming through the courts, the criminal courts, in fact, there's a disproportionate number of sex crimes which are coming through. And that's just not necessarily, we're not talking about rapes, we're talking about people, ordinary people with jobs, people who are married, people sometimes in churches, facing allegations relating to downloading of indecent images of children, extreme pornography, and so on. And in fact, in my preparation for the talk, I really found that violent crime is on the decrease. Alcohol consumption overall is decreasing. And so what is happening is that I think people's problems, anxieties, and so on, rather than self-medicating as people used to do by and large through alcohol and then through drugs, now what we find through the internet is something which has acted as a form of self-medication. And in some ways, it's a drug just as dangerous as any other drug. It starts off pretty harmless, but it then can progress to such a stage where people end up doing the most abhorrent things and end up spending many, many years in prison. So yes, that's as a society, there's no doubt about it. The statistics tell their own story of the rise in that. And I think in part it's fueled by the fact that we have this constant exposure to sexualization, in terms of what we see on television. So for example, with Netflix, they recently released a film called Cuties, which was said to be a work of art. But in fact, if many of those men who I've represented over the years were found to be in possession of some of the images that you saw, they would have probably gone to prison. And so it's not just that particular program, but it is pervasive.
Andrea, Monica Brownut on Facebook is asking this question: what is the Christian view on sex, please? Andrea, what would you say to her?
Well, the Christian view is very much that we find it rooted in Genesis 1, that God made us male and female, that he made us to be together in lifelong union, and that the place for sexual expression is between one man and one woman in a committed relationship for life. And we see Jesus pointing to that. And in all of Paul's letters, we see this command, this to be pure, to not lust after the things of this world. And I think that is that was interesting. I mean, just flicking back quickly to the case of Shay, something that they would on this very point, when she tried to talk about what marriage was, and that even to lust after someone, not when you're not in a marriage, was sinful. They even latched onto that. So even to think being a lesbian, even to think about it, even just to think that way is a sin. And so everything was continually twisted. But I think to move to what Mike is saying, I think that what we have is a society that is sex saturated, that has idealized sex, as we find in Romans 1. And when you exchange the beauty and truth of God for that lie, what you end up is in the exchanging of relationships, all relationships, whether pornographic or same-sex relationships, in a way which really displeases God, but also harms us. And I think that Mike's analysis there is that we very often end up in public, kind of on this kind of hard cultural edge around the whole gay movement, but there's a sense in which the secrecy of pornography the secrecy of sexual sin is very pervasive. And the stats show, don't they, Mike, that pornography within the churches, sadly, is very pervasive. Our children are being given access. The children generally in society, I mean, even without accessing porn sites, have huge access to pornographic images. And I think this whole sexualization means that we are then unable to speak clearly on sexual purity to a lost and hurting and broken society. And that's
talking about this on a day when revelations have come out and investigations have been reported about Ravi Zacharias, the top international apologist, I've benefited from his writings and his talks, and I'm sure many other viewers have as well. But very sadly, it's now come to light that he was involved in sexual misconduct of various kinds with a number of women and masseurs, and he stored photographs on his phone and all of this kind of stuff. Michael, how do you respond to this kind of revelation about the sexual impurity in the church, really?
Yeah, I think the thing is that it is the case that pornography use is endemic, unfortunately, within the members, and also even within the leadership within churches. It is less prevalent, these statistics tell us, than it is maybe in the world generally, which is obviously expected and a good thing, but it is still very much prevalent, and it has to be dealt with. And I think the thing is that it can affect the person who's the new convert. It can affect the person who is at the top of the tree. And we all should, in that situation, be prepared to confront ourselves, be prepared to confront our leaders, in terms of, if there is any hint that we get that, in fact, maybe something wrong is going on, even if they founded a wonderful, huge organization like Ravi Zacharias, we need the courage and the lack of fear to be able to confront people in that situation, because it just drags everything down. The reality is that we lose all credibility in terms of our Christian witness unless we're able to maintain, not just in terms of what we say, but in terms of our character. And then it goes. And I think what happens is that we are not effective as a church because we're in this prison. And we don't reach out to our neighbors. We don't reach out to those people because we have no joy. We have no peace with ourselves. We have no close relationship with God because we're in this prison. And so when you are free of that, and then God in those circumstances is just longing to use us. He has that desire to use all Christians as much as possible, but he cannot use us if the boat's got a hole in the bottom of it. You have to patch up the hole first before you set sail.
Yeah. So the importance of accountability there and confrontation. Although I understand that Ravi it does say in the report that one of the leaders in the organization did try and confront him, and basically Ravi sort of ostracized him and said that you're spreading rumors or whatever, and didn't respond well, right? And that should have been a red flag. He should have presumably taken it further at that point. He only had rumors and only had sort of like I think the point he was concerned about was the impression given, rather than anything actually happening. Do you know what I mean? And the reaction to that confrontation should have been a massive red flag, shouldn't it? About actually maybe he's trying to hide something here.
I think the difficulties just generally here is that it's no wonder we end up in a courtroom with people saying, what do Christians, there are gay Christians, not all Christians think like you. If you have someone who would have upheld this kind of teaching in public life, such as Ravi Zacharias, or let's say Jonathan Fletcher, John Smythe, these people in public life who have recently come to light as being abusive in relationships within conservative evangelical movements, or let's say Carl Lentz of Hillsong, these kind of massive celebrity fools. What you have is a watching world saying that looks no different. That looks really unappealing. And so it comes down to Mike's point of this need truly to humble ourselves as a church. And it's going back I mean, it is going back to a verse in the Bible, which is in danger of becoming cliched in this time. Of course, nothing in the Bible could ever be cliched. But in 2 Chronicles 7, it says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face.
Yes.
And what does it say? It says, actually, this is a message to God's people, and turn from their wicked ways.
Yes, good point.
And our turning from our wicked ways, one of the greatest sins, as Mike just said, is this massive sexualization within the church that we've permitted the world in that way. We don't confess it. We don't talk about it. Yeah. We don't deal with it. And there's no one.
The very phrase before, I've been struck recently, the very phrase before that verse is about when there's pestilence in the land. Do you know that? The very phrase before, when there's pestilence in the land, then if my people, right? That's how it goes in that passage in 2 Chronicles 7. And here we are in a time of pestilence. How relevant is that? Right?
Yes.
To where we are today. Yeah. Marco, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that it is painful. It is painful. And I think very often people have these, in my experience, very often people have these problems. And I know from experiences speaking to other guys that they will very often try to deal with these issues themselves. But in reality, whatever it is, the pornography or maybe any other form of addiction, is just really a manifestation of an underlying problem. And I think my really plea to the church is this, is that stop beating yourself up. Obviously, they're going to feel guilty in the first place, but do actually do something about it. That's the most important thing, because if you just hear the same message every week that you've got to be good and you've got to be Christ-like and reach out to your friends and family and so on, but you find yourself in a position where you just cannot do it, then in those circumstances, there is help. And I would urge anybody to reach out to Christian Concern, because we can put you in touch with people, to counselors, to therapists and so on, who are there, who are experienced. And, I think the biggest lie that we can fall into is either that I'm the only person in the world who has this issue, or everybody else has got this problem. And the reality is that neither of them are true. But if you believe that lie, then you will just stay in the situation that you're in. But there is help which is out there to deal with all of these kinds of issues, because very often, what we see at the tip of the iceberg, nobody starts out the day, when they're 17, 18, saying, I want to have an abortion today. It's a long process that starts off with just a few actions, and eventually, many years down the line, they find themselves in an abortion clinic or whatever the situation is. But if they get the help before they find themselves there, then that's really the best for them and everyone.
And a church becomes pure. A holy people is a happy people. And so let's think about how we create the cultures. If we do sincerely turn from our wicked ways within the church, because that's the answer to healing the land. Because in that verse, God promises that he will heal our land if we turn from our wicked ways and confess this. Well, just as Mike said, that when we're honest, the Lord can work with us. But then just imagine churches that are first and foremost keeping their children safe and keeping their children pure, offering places where people can be transformed and full of and given hope. These are all things that the church is able to offer up and down this nation. And we know that it's Jesus Christ that, as Michael said earlier, that he transforms, he heals, he turns things around. And when we see that really done, in our own lives and in the lives of our families, in the lives of our local communities, then we will see a nation healed.
Andrea, a lot of people are saying in response to the revelation about Ravi Zacharias that the problem is celebrity Christianity, where somebody is a big charismatic person and they go and they write books and they get a huge reputation and they go on speaking tours and stuff, and then that then is the root of the problem. Ultimately, we put them on too high a pedestal and this kind of thing. And then what would you say in response to that, Andrea?
God uses individuals.
Yeah, that's true.
God does actually use individuals. And I mean, when I read the Bible, and what I learn is that character is key.
Yeah.
I mean, and what it distresses me that Samson fell, that Noah fell, that David fell. God still uses individuals. So I think we have to be aware of that God raises up individuals, God raises up organizations. We have, and the people that we need to love and pray for individuals that are raised up and used of God. And as you said, the accountability structures around them are important. Of course, what becomes a madness is when we, the people of God, idolize a person rather than love Jesus.
Yeah.
But I think that we must actually have great love for the people that God raises up to be, and pray for them and be earnest about them and recognize that is part of what God is doing. Of course, for the person themselves, then the key is character. Are you close to Jesus? Are you holding fast to him? Whose adoration do you want? Do you want the well done, good and faithful servant, or do you want the adoration of the world? I mean, we live. So I think that whilst, of course, we don't chase after celebrity culture, we live in a world where people become well known through various means. And then the question for the church is, how will we look after them, and so on.
And one key to that is being part of a local church, isn't it, really, and being accountable in that situation as well. And then I think Michael's point is very valuable, that there is help. Part of the problem here is the shame issue, isn't it, Michael? That people feel ashamed and feel like, I can't possibly admit to anyone else in the world. And
yeah, I mean, prior to that talk that I did about a year or so ago, I sent a text message to lots of people that I know, just saying, would you be able to answer these questions for me? Is this something that you've ever struggled with? And I sent it to quite a few of my friends and people that I knew, and I was surprised about a couple of people who got back to me and said, yes, no, I really struggled with this. And I did struggle with this, and I continued to struggle with, for example, pornography and masturbation, and then that continued into my adult life, and gradually managed to deal with that and get the help that I needed. And I was surprised because I didn't know that. I've known some of these people for many, many years. And I think the thing is that because especially men who struggle with this issue slightly more than women do, very much want to keep themselves to themselves. They don't want to expose themselves to ridicule and to laughter. And so we just end up just not saying anything to anyone. And I think as a church, we need to just say, look, this is a problem that until we deal with this particular problem, then we're not going to really see revival. We pray for revival every week. We ask for it and so on. But how is God going to really revive or show revival in this country if the church themselves aren't in a position whereby if thousands of people became Christians, they just wouldn't be able to take them in because they're not in a good state. So I think revival has to start with us. And I think that this is really the epidemic of our time. And as a result of lockdown, inevitably, it's only going to have got worse because people are spending more time indoors. They're very bored. There's nothing to do. And unfortunately, as we know, the devil makes work for idle hands.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So, Andrea, but we have, a much better message than that, don't we? We have hope and forgiveness and repentance and life for people, and that's the message that we need to give. And as we purify ourselves as the church and are able to offer a pure message and a real hope to people out of this.
That's it. That's the work of Christian Concern. That's the work of the church. We need to have our confidence in the gospel. The gospel is the power to transform lives. I mean, we're living in a health pandemic, but there's a sense which during this health pandemic, as Michael has said, some of the issues have become still more heightened. Addiction issues, the whole issue around abortion that was mentioned here as well. Those numbers are high. We live in a Western world that has largely turned its back on God. Well, we, the church, we're called by name, and we're to cry out to him, and we're to turn from our wicked ways. And if we cry out, then the promise is that he will heal our land. And we have to believe that, and believe too that when we cry out, that he, by the power of his Holy Spirit, will transform us. So let's work and move to that.
Amen. Brilliant. Listen, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Mike. And thank you for watching on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you are. I hope you found that helpful and useful. We'll look forward to joining you again next week. Do pray with us about our various cases and for Shay Amuba in particular this week as we await judgment. And we'll see you again, same time, same place on Friday at lunchtime. Thank you very much.